second. Somebody says they can destroy the P-zombie argument. Let's see what they're talking about. Yo, what's up? Yep. Blue sky.
Yo, can you hear me?
Yeah. I'm just waiting for you to destroy the P-zombies.
So there's a couple ways we can go about kind of refuting the P-zombie idea. First of all, I'm not so sure that I can conceive of a world where everything is exactly the same. That's the conception, right? That everything physically is exactly the same. And yet
Well,
people there are not conscious. What does that even mean? How can you
a
say it's
simpler
super
way.
easy to conceive of that?
Well, it's not necessarily easy, but it's conceivable. Okay, there's a few things here. Let me clarify, right? Do me a favor and just mute when you're not talking so we got
Yeah, you got it.
um so a simpler way to communicate the same point is to say, like, is it conceivable to you that I am an NPC right now, like right now? Which just means that, like, I act like you, I look like you, but I have no like mental states. Like there's no like internal like observer. There's no like private like mental experience, right? Like the lights are on but no one's home, right? Like I'm literally just an NPC. And the question is, like, is that conceivable? And the other clarification I want to make, right, is that by conceivable, I just mean logically possible, right? It's not necessarily like, can you imagine it? It's more like, is there a contradiction in imagining it? And so, basically, yeah, go ahead. Does that like clarify anything?
Yeah, I would contest that it is not logically conceivable. That would
You would
be
have to give the
possible.
contradiction. You have to give the contradiction.
Yeah. So the contradiction. Well, so your question about could I conceive that you don't have consciousness or that you don't have some sort of Cartesian theater going on, that it's all just informational processing. There's no subjective quality to your experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that I can't conceive of that unless there are some underlying physical differences between your brain structure and mine, between the physical makeup of your mind and the physical makeup of mine.
Yeah,
Um,
sure.
barring those differences, if you've got all the same physical structure of a normal functioning human brain, then it doesn't make sense to me. It's not even logically conceivable to me. Let me give you an analogy that sort of makes this point a little more clear to me. Imagine that we go to some alien planet and there's these animals running around, and they are exactly biologically identical to the animals on our planet. Let's say you can explain it however you want. Let's say there's lions. They're exactly biologically identical. But I say to you, oh, they are identical, but these animals aren't alive. They're not actually living. They're just chemical processes. They're just, chemistry and physics. But there's nothing actually alive about those animals. To me, that conception doesn't really make sense. And I think it's a similar case in the case of philosophical zombies, where you're saying like they're anatomically identical, but there's no consciousness. And to me, it's a similar thing of like, that doesn't make sense because
Yeah,
that's
okay.
how I define consciousness.
I understand. So look, whenever we're having these conceivability discussions, right? I think it's important to delineate modality, right? And so when I say conceivable, right, I just mean logically possible. And when I say logically possible, I just mean that there's no contradiction, right? That's the logical modality, right? And your response to that is like, no, it's not conceivable because there would need to be some underlying like physical difference, because the way I define consciousness is that physicality, is those brain states, right? But really what you're saying is like, it's not logically impossible, it's metaphysically impossible. It just is the case that in this world, mental states coincide with physical states necessarily because they just are the same thing, right? Am I saying that correctly? Do you agree?
I do agree. Yeah, I think you're representing it pretty well. I would just say that a logical contradiction, if I say it really clearly, would be that the logical contradiction in the philosophical argument would philosophical zombie argument be that you're saying basically, to boil it down, these uh, philosophical zombies are exactly the same, but they are different. There, you see, there's a logical contradiction there, and
No, 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 no. That's not what
you're
I'm saying.
shuffling in through the back door that the consciousness is the difference. When my
Mm-hmm.
entire contention is that that difference can't exist except for physically.
Yeah. So I'm not saying that they're exactly the same, but they're different. That's a straw man, right? I'm saying that they're exactly the same in every single way except one, right? Which is that an NPC has no mental states, right? Um, Now, again, going back to what I was saying, all you're saying is that it's it's metaphysically the case, right? That mental states coincide with physical states because they are identical to them. All right. And that's fine. You can say that. You can hold to that position, but that doesn't render a logical contradiction, right? It still is the case that some modally speaking, in some possible world, NPCs exist, right? And which renders the identity contingent, not necessary, right? So what I'm trying to say is that logically speaking, right, mental states are not guaranteed in any way, shape, or form by the physical states a priori. Okay. What you're doing is a posteriori stipulation, definition, right? Identity, right? But that identity is not necessarily the case. That's what the zombies is supposed to be pointing out there. It's not logically necessary that the identity of my mental states are my brain states, right? And so what you're saying is like, okay, it's not like logically necessary, but it's metaphysically necessary because that's how I define it, right? And that's fine, but that means that your identity is contingent, right? It's not the case in all possible worlds that mental states coincide with physical states, right? But in every other case of successful identity, like water is H2O. I actually had a formal debate on this exactly, so you're kind of walking into the wrong. That's how I let you up immediately. So you're kind of cooked on this, bro. There's no way out of it. So like in every other case of, unless you're gonna bust out like PCS, which I don't know if you know what that is, but um, in every other case of successful identity, like water is H2O, right? It is necessarily the case in all possible worlds, right? This is a condition for ontological identity when we're making such claims. Like it's necessarily the case in all possible worlds. Does all that make sense to you? And this violates that. The
That
identity.
does make sense, but let's remember that the identity of something like water, as Kripke said, is an a posteriori
Yes.
necessary truth. So we didn't
Yes.
know that. We weren't
That's
aware
right.
of that. We had to figure it out. And there's no logical inconsistency in the idea that maybe that's also the case for consciousness. And so before we figured out what H2O was, we could have possibly conceived, we could have logically, it would have appeared totally logical to think of a possible world where water was not H2O.
Yes,
And
I
that is the
agree.
position that I view you as being in with consciousness, where you're in this position of thinking it's logically conceivable that consciousness could be not correlated, not there could be a possible world where there are mental states that are not related to physical states, or you know what I mean with the philosophical stuff.
Yeah. So
But
you're
we
saying
might
that
resolve it to not be the case, to not be logically possible.
sure. So to kind of steel man what you're saying there, you're saying that it's conceivable to you that a complete scientific investigation will reveal that the identity of mental states being physical states is necessarily the case. Right?
Yeah, I would agree that we're not there yet. We haven't been able to completely excise this philosophical zombie stuff, but we weren't there for water for a long time. There were possible worlds where water was not H2O for a long time.
Sure.
And now we
Sure.
know that's not the case.
Yeah, I mean, I can concede slightly to the point that, there was a point in history when the identity of water was not H2O, right? And then given all of the underlying physical facts, the identity then necessarily followed. But it took scientific investigation to unveil all the underlying physical facts. So I can acknowledge that. But at the same time, in this conversation, right, I can point out the fundamental difference, right, and why I don't think it's plausible to think that given all of the underlying physical facts about the brain, that the identity of mental states are going to necessarily follow. And the reason why I don't think that's plausible is because it's a category error, right? Like I would just go back to Nagel. I would go to Chalmers. I would go to um, the argument that third person descriptions never become first person descriptions. It's not entailed by logic. It's not even reasonable to think that it would be, right? And so, if by all of the underlying physical, like, if what you're saying is this, if what you're saying is, look, once we have a full description of the brain, the identity of consciousness is just going to be like obvious, right? It's just going to be the case that the identity logically follows at some point in our scientific future, right? From these brain descriptions, right? I would just point straight back to Nagel, dude. Nagel refutes this.
Yeah, I think so. Here, what's really important is that we talk about the difference between instantiations and explanations, right? An explanation of consciousness is not going to give me first person access to your consciousness. I'm not going to know what it's like to be a bat, but I can understand it. I can explain it. I can have theories that do collapse our theories of consciousness into an underlying physicalism, and we can have.
What does that look like? What you broke up? I can't hear you at all right now, Blue Sky. I am actually gonna make you a mod, Eva. Let's see. At Inference Engines request.
Hey man, thanks for talking.
Yeah, okay. Well, I can hear you now. I couldn't hear you for a while.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to call. So I just said briefly that we need to be clear about the difference between instantiations and explanations. So yes, I'm not going to necessarily know exactly what it is like to be a bat, but we can come up with underlying physicalist. We can come up with explanations and theories of consciousness that collapse into physicalism. And yes, there will still be something that I can't actually know what it is like to be a bat. I agree with you there. I agree
Yeah,
with Nagel
so
on that one.
I mean, look, I don't even know what that means, collapse into physicalism. I don't know what it means to explain something, um, but not be able to, like, so if the target of explanation are these qualitative mental states, right? If that is the target of explanation, if that is the target of reduction, right? Then and you cannot, by your own admission, articulate those, right? Then how could it be possible that you get a reduction or an explanation where you can't even articulate the thing you're trying to explain? How is it possible to not have epistemic access and still render some kind of reduction? How's that possible?
So I think it's possible in a similar way. I agree with, well, I guess in order to truly make that possible, I have to give up on qualia, which I'm willing to do. I'm
Right, you
willing
would
to
have
say,
to be an eliminativist. That's right.
how about an illusionist? Will you grant me illusionism rather than full
I will
eliminatism?
not grant you illusionism.
What?
No,
What? But that's
no.
my way out of this pickle. I
I
have to.
know. I
I have
know.
to.
But the problem is that it's self-defeating.
No, no. Qualia are very interesting, and I think that there's a lot of good reason to think that we can explain them without having direct epistemological access to them. Again, just to make a quick analogy, we can explain black holes. We have theories of black holes. We don't have to create one. We don't have to become one. I know it's a slightly more complex situation with consciousness because we are talking about subjective experiences, but I want to untangle this Cartesian qualia talk and
So look.
and make subjective qualities more accessible third person. And I think that's I think Dennett makes a great argument about
Oh,
qualia
no,
being
no.
kind of illusionary.
I just think it's funny the way you're talking. I want to make qualia more accessible. My goal is to make yeah, like no shit, dude. That is the problem, isn't it? Is that qualia are
That's the problem. But I think it's a misconception that they are. First of all, that they exist the way people think they do, and that they are. I mean, there's all sorts of information about qualia. There's all sorts of third person accessible information about quote unquote qualia, about subjective experience. Our entire lives are filled with third person accounts of subjective
no,
experience.
no. There's information that has been inferred, but it's not. It's there's layers of abstraction in between. So like, look, we get to go about this, right? Let's imagine that we enlarge my. I'm going in the Leibniz direction here. Let's imagine that we enlarge my brain to the size of a university campus. Okay. And you walk inside. Now, let's imagine by you, I just mean that like you're some kind of like non-sentient, non-conscious AI. Let's say you're like chat. Hopefully, you don't think ChatGPT is conscious. So let's imagine you're like ChatGPT with like some kind of robot body, right? Like you agree that it's like not conscious. There's no like internal mental state, right?
Yeah, if your formulation is that it explicitly is not, then I can get on board. I mean,
Okay, fine.
yeah,
Yeah, that's all. That's all. So for the purpose, yeah, like let's stay out of that rabbit hole. In the hypothetical, it is stipulated that this machine is not conscious, but it's like intelligent, right? It can like deduce things. You know, it can like come to like maybe scientific conclusions. It can use induction. It can use all this kind of stuff, right? Um, so it walks inside my brain, right? And it has full, complete access for 1,000 years to the interior of my like brain. Um, and it has all the best tools like in the world. This is kind of a different formulation of like the Mary's room, like knowledge argument type situation, but like maybe like a little more um like real. So this like robot has like full complete access to my brain. It's got like all Google. It's got like all the textbooks, right? Like there's nothing that it would like find in my brain that would directly indicate that like I was there with it the whole time. Supposing that it like didn't know what it was like to be, right? Because there is nothing it is like to be that thing. Like there's nothing in my brain that would like logically entail that there's some experience happening behind the scenes. And like so we can talk about qualia, we can talk about a Cartesian theater, we can talk about like the straw man that Daniel Dennett knocked down. But at the end of the day, right, in this very real example that I just gave you, I feel like you kind of have to admit that there's something there that's not going to be able to be captured by this kind of methodology of just like walking through my brain and like observe. Like I'm literally there with that fucking robot the whole time and it had no clue. I'm there with it, dude. And it had no idea and it would not be able to infer it because it doesn't know what it's like to be. It knows nothing of consciousness. It would it's I'm a black box, bro. I don't exist. to it. But clearly, I know that I do exist. So you must be missing something with that methodology. Like, and so it doesn't even matter what we call that thing, right? Whatever you want to call it, you want to call it quality, you want to call it Cartesian theory, it doesn't matter. Like, there's something missing, dude. And that's what we're talking about when we say consciousness. I don't think you can like define that away, bro. Like we
And
know that.
can I voice a couple of complaints with this hypothetical, or a couple of
Sure.
weak, not necessarily weak, but I just mean where I would contest it.
Yeah, sure.
So I would contest, first of all, if this AI, whatever, can run your brain successfully for 1,000 years. I don't know if it's running it or if it's just hanging out there. I don't know.
It's just hanging out. Like my brain
It's
is like
just hanging
running.
out.
Yeah,
Okay,
but
if your
it's
brain is
just like
running and it's just hanging out, does it have access to like the outside world while it's in your brain? Can it see?
mm,
Because you would literally be able to write down, like on a piece of paper, I feel like there's someone inside my brain. I feel like someone right now. I exist, period.
yeah, that kind
And
of gets away from the point of what is meant to be demonstrated here. So let's just stipulate for the purpose of the hypothetical that no, it's just like stuck inside my brain, but it has all the tools it could possibly ever need.
so then what can it see inside your brain? It can just see the neurons
Yep.
firing. Is that what you're saying?
It can see the neurons firing. It can see like oxytocin, like
But it doesn't have any access to the outside world. It can't see anything outside the brain.
right.
So, I mean, I think this, now we've got a seriously handcuffed AI. And I would say that, yeah, maybe it's possible it would never figure out something was
Okay,
going
well,
on.
I'll give you this then. I'll give you this. I'll widen it up a bit, and I'll give you your hypothetical, which is that it does have access and it can see what I wrote down on the paper, right? And let's say that I wrote down on the paper, I'm having an internal experience. I feel things, right? There would
Right.
still be no way because it has no concept, right, of what it is like to be. It wouldn't even be able to apprehend what that's even fucking meant to refer to. Don't you agree to that?
Well, if it's smart enough, then I think that there would be pretty clear. I mean, that's a clear evidential thing that we should take note of. Now, I understand this is opening up a can of worms because the AI we have now, which I don't believe are conscious, can write things like I'm having an experience. So that's a little tricky. But I mean, we could flip this whole thing on its head and say, if that is really the case, then how can you trust your own eyes when
But
you read something that says or how can you trust your own thoughts when you think, I exist, there's really something here?
so look, there's AI right now that you can get to say, I'm having an experience, I am conscious, right? And so the thing is, right, the difference between this robotic hypothetical AI inside my brain and me writing down on a piece of paper, right? It's conceivable to me that the AI that we're specifically stipulating is not conscious would also be saying things like I am conscious, I feel things. And so there would be no discernible it's kind of the zombie argument restated, right? There would be no discernible difference between like the behavior of this AI and the behavior of me in terms of what I'm writing on the paper, right? And the only discernible difference would be like the physical stuff, right? And so we would have like the same output, right? Of like we're writing down on a piece of paper, I am conscious, I am feeling things. One of us is, one of us isn't, and we cannot make the determination based off empirical observation or dissecting the brain, right? Like the robot would not be able to determine whether or not I was being truthful based off my brain with certainty, based on the structure, the chemicals, all this kind. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. I think, again, I would maybe take a similar tack where, yeah, right now we have no idea how we would be able to determine that. But I can't say for certain that there will be no theory of cognition or consciousness that wouldn't allow a super smart, intelligent AI to examine the neural firings, the network in the brain, and determine that this system does indeed have consciousness. I mean, that seems to be, you're saying it like it's a fact that could never in principle be true, but I'm not so sure. I mean, I
Yeah,
think that may be true.
I'm saying that it's a problem of principle because of the category difference.
So I think that we should be careful about confusing epistemic and epistemological uncertainty with ontological like categories.
Yeah, I agree. We
Yes,
should, but I think that
yes. Just
yeah,
because I
go ahead.
don't have epistemological access to something like your consciousness, that doesn't necessitate the fact that it's its own ontological
I
category.
agree. I agree. I agree. But it's not just a simple lack of epistemological access, right? It's 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 like a a principled issue to where like it seems like it's never going to be the case that we have epistemological access. It seems like through that kind of methodology, off limits, epistemologically off limits, not just like temporarily, right? This is the cumulative case that I'm trying to present to you, which is that like look, if you are already a physicalist, like yeah, okay, you could just say like, oh, some future advance will like reveal it to us. But if you were not inclined towards physicalism, right? Like the case that I'm trying to present is that there's no reason to take that view seriously. Now I understand why you would dig your heels in if you're already a physicalist. Um,
Can I just say that again? I think that yes, I would agree with you that there is some, when it comes to instantiation of a consciousness, there is some epistemological barrier. But I think it's important we don't throw away all of the stuff that we do have epistemological access to that is evidence of consciousness. And I know we were here a little bit earlier, but again, let me just say, like, if you walk around in the world as a human being, every human being comes to the determination that other human beings do have consciousness because our world is filled with the effects of consciousness, with the output of consciousness. These are all things that can be studied in tandem with the structure of consciousness and do not require anything non-physical.
so yeah, I mean, I'm not a dualist, so throwing non-physical there and at the end
Are
kind
you
of
an idealist? What
I'm an
are you?
idealist. Yeah, I'm an idealist.
Man,
So
that's a tough spot. You're a rare breed.
every well, I don't, not really, but so
Yes. This is really non-standard.
so actually, it's funny you say that. Like, I'm an objective idealist, which puts me like in a panpsychist subcategory, right? And so the only reason I'm bringing that up is because panpsychism actually has more support than eliminativism, which is what you're trying to motivate. Panpsychism is like 8%. Eliminativism is like 4.
Yeah,
So
panpsychism is having a hot decade. I'll give you that.
yeah. So I just wanted to throw that little insult out there since you said I'm in the minority. I mean, actually, you're in more of a minority than me. But look, that being fuck, I forgot what I was gonna say actually before that.
To be clear, I'm not a full eliminativist. I'm just a physicalist. I'm just a materialist. I'm a functionalist, really.
Well, I'll give you this. Like, look, if physicalism is true, it's got to be fucking eliminativism, bro. Because if it's not, dude, like, it's not conceivable to me, right? That everything is physical, um, and also there exists some private phenomenon. That just seems like a contradiction. Um, because like physical is public, it's defined as public, fully accessible publicly. And so if some private phenomenon exists, it just seems to be a contradiction to be a physicalist. So I will grant you this, like I'm not granting eliminativism, but I'm saying that if physicalism is true, it has to be eliminativism. Otherwise it's just fully fucking like I don't know what the fuck we're even talking about, dude. Um,
I think a good way to think of it would be thinking about like chemistry and physics, right? Like, yes, chemistry can ultimately be talked about in the terms of physics, but when you're talking about chemistry or about biology for that matter, it becomes way more useful to talk about emergent levels of structure. It becomes way more practical. And I think that consciousness is going to sit somewhere up there, up above biology, where it's just
Plausible.
it is reducible, but that doesn't mean that it's not real. It doesn't mean that it's not real at all. It just
Nah,
means that it's reducible, but the patterns themselves are super real. Like
nah. Now we're getting into a different rabbit hole, dude. This conversation around consciousness is so multi-layered because as soon as you start talking about emergent properties, immediately there's a delineation that we need to make between weak emergence and strong
weak,
emergence.
weak. Let me be very clear. I'm talking about weak.
Brother, yeah, and that's fine. And I'm not even sure weak emergence exists in the way that it's described in the philosophy of like science, in the philosophy of physics. And here's what I mean by that. Like, would you say that like a sports team is a weakly emergent property? Like the
Like
team,
team spirit might be a weakly emergent property.
right? Okay. So I would say that that's totally and completely dependent on the person who's observing it. There's no such thing as independently existing team spirit without baking mind into it, right? There's no such thing as like the wetness of water. Like
Yeah, I was
wetness
gonna
is
say heat. Let's talk about temperature. I think that's a
right.
better
So
battlefield.
temperature is a simplification, right? It's the average molecular motion in a designated area, right? And this is also mind dependent. It's not truly novel. It's only novel because we've reified it, right? I don't think there is such a thing as objective emergent properties, dude. I don't think it exists. I think we reify the objects of our perception because they're useful, right? And I got a YouTube channel. If anybody's interested, we did a video critiquing Sean Carroll on this concept of emergence, right? It's called Reality Gone Mental. It's all one word. But I think we reify the objects of our perception, right? And what is useful to us. And we just say, like, oh, like that's what the universe does. Like, there's all these interesting things you can say about it. And that's called an emergent property. And it's novel and it's new. And really, it's not. It's just like an amplification of whatever is there. And then we regard this amplification as something interesting. And so we talk about it in terms of being an emergent property that's like novel. And I don't think it's novel. I think it's mind dependent. And I think that's the case for every single emergent property that you could possibly give me. And that being the case, like it would seem to be that thinking about the mind as an emergent property would be circular reasoning because emergent properties require mind. How could the mind be an emergent property when the concept of emergent property requires mind? It's circular.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I've got to jump, but let me just finish with this. I think you're super keyed into the epistemological barriers that we have.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's just I personally find it difficult sometimes or ill convincing to move from epistemological barriers to metaphysics or to ontology. I think that it needs to flow the other way around, or maybe not the other way around, but I just mean like it's a tough pathway to walk down. I've got to go. Thank you for having me on. I hope I'm going to check out your YouTube. This was awesome. Thanks, man.
Yeah, sounds good, man. Peace out. Yeah, so look, his last comment, just to address his last like comment, he's hesitant to move from an epistemic gap to a metaphysical gap, right? And I agree, you should be. But make no mistake about it, right? What you're hesitant about is getting rid of your prior presupposition. Okay. So you're already making a metaphysical claim. Okay. You're already making the metaphysical claim that everything is physical. And when you run into an epistemological barrier, you're hesitant to get rid of that assumption, that prior assumption. And that's fine. But at a certain point, you have to just take a step back and be like, when is enough enough? Right? When is it the case that I should revisit my prior assumptions? When is it the case that I should see if there's some more consistent alternative? When is it the case that like I just go like, yeah, magical thinking is not good, and I should probably see where I went wrong. Like I don't believe in magical thinking, dude. Like Yeah, maybe I'll leave it at that.